Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, I'm sorry to tell you that my subject is securing the Indian Ocean, which has nothing to do with economics. And I'm sorry to disappoint large sections. I know economists find security wallas a bit annoying because all they do is demand more and more money. But to get back to the Indian Ocean, I think it's interesting to note that the Indian Ocean trade in the pre-colonial days was not policed. It was very peaceful, and everyone was quite happy with that old system. There were international cities like Aden, Calicut, or Muziris as it was called, and Malacca, which were truly international cities where Indians, Chinese, Javanese, Malays, Arabs, they all rubbed shoulders with each other under the benign protection of the local sovereign. Now, all that changed with the coming of the colonial powers, because the colonial powers brought naval power to back trade, whereas in the old system, it was by and large left to the private sector. And with this came enforced taxation. The Portuguese, for instance, taxed everyone passing by Goa and Hormuz. The Dutch taxed everyone passing by Sri Lanka. And of course, the East India Company came and taxed everybody altogether. Eventually, of course, they came here to govern, and as you know, the rest is history. A lot of idealists ask whether it's possible to go back to the ideal days of the pre-colonial era. I'm afraid that's not possible because the old pattern of pre-colonial trade has changed completely. The Indian Ocean has become an international throughway, an international waterway, and it has become the property of the entire world. And it's filled with what the maritime strategists call sea lines of communication, or SLOCs. Now, these SLOCs, where they pass through the high seas, are not policed. By and large, it's left for their own protection. But when the SLOCs pass through the Straits of Malacca, these are called choke points, through the Straits of Malacca, which is the busiest waterway in the world, or it passes through the Straits of Hormuz, which is the busiest energy waterway in the world. The country that is most concerned with the safety of sea lines, of course, is the strongest power in the Indian Ocean, which is the United States. It's not a resident power. The strongest resident navy in the Indian Ocean is, by and large, the Indian Navy. The United States has the political interest of keeping the sea lines of communication free, and it exercises with every navy in the Indian Ocean littoral. And the objective of that exercise is often protection of sea lines of communication. And in fact, that is the objective of the large numbers of Indo-US maritime exercises that have been held. But all the same, at the choke points, the responsibility for patrolling are those of the littoral countries. And the ASEAN powers control the Straits of Malacca, and the Gulf states, particularly Oman and Saudi Arabia, control the Straits of Hormuz. The question to ask at a conference like this is, in this fully international environment, has the South Asian powers any special role? I must say that the Indian Navy has long considered this as being the biggest resident power. And for the last 10 or 15 years, every 2 years, the Indian Navy hosts an exercise in the Andaman Islands called Milan, or meeting, where something like 9 countries participate. And they spend about 6 or 7 days. It's a low-profile exercise, and unfortunately, this has not been replicated on the West Coast due to political tensions. The Indian Navy has also founded something called the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, IONS, where the chiefs of the Indian Ocean navies meet in different countries every year. This was started about 8 years ago. The current chairman of this meeting is Australia. There is also the Association of Indian Ocean Rim Countries that meets regularly. And for some reason, between themselves, they have agreed that security will not be discussed. Therefore, I'm not quite clear what they discuss if they don't discuss security. but there it is. Other countries have floated ideas too. The United States Naval Chief, for instance, floated the idea of something called, it was a very catchy slogan, it's called a 1,000-ship Navy, meaning thereby that any country which is interested in the safety of sea lines in the Indian Ocean could join in. And if everybody joined in, 1,000 ships would result, and that would keep the Indian Ocean free. Unfortunately, when the chips are down, like it happened in Somalia, and the piracy occurred something like 8 or 9 years ago, it is the Western navies that have reacted the quickest. So patrols were initiated by the European Union and NATO, and eventually grouped under an international commander. Pakistan joined this international convening and has even commanded the group at some stage. Indian foreign policy doesn't permit participation in these initiatives unless it's commanded by the United Nations. And since the United Nations have not actually participated in the Somalia patrol, 3 countries have cooperated with the patrol but have kept out. That's India, China, and Russia. Now, it would be encouraging to see the Indian Ocean powers take the leadership for the Somalia patrol, but this hasn't happened. And partly the reason for this is that the Indian Ocean navies are by and large fairly small navies, and maintaining international patrols are fairly expensive. India has not pushed in this area because it has been careful about the sentiments of the smaller navies who don't wish to be seen to be overawed by large navies, pushing them in directions they don't want to go. But India has tried to make good the deficiencies by transferring small ships and aircraft to countries like Sri Lanka, Mauritius, Seychelles, and so on. India also conducts bilateral naval exercises with all countries in the Indian Ocean, Southeast Asia, and the Gulf navies. It also provides submarines and aircraft for navies that don't have them to work up their navies. In the years to come, the largest user of the Indian Ocean is likely to be China for the transit of goods, which they are garnering from every part of Africa. So in China's case, the question comes, as it did in the East India Company, will flag follow trade? That's the big question that arises. Will the Chinese Navy come into the Indian Ocean at all? Actually, the Chinese Navy is already here as far as the Somalia patrol is concerned. The question is, will they come here to protect their trade, as the green flag? Or will they come as part of geopolitics, as a competitor to the United States in replacing the world's hegemon? I mean, in what role will China come here? This is unknown at the moment. There are some unresolved maritime territorial disputes in the Indian Ocean, but most of them are dormant. As you know, there are a number of islands in the Indian Ocean. They are small economic entities, but they are of enormous strategic significance, because if they pass into the hands of any unwanted power, they will get bases in the Indian Ocean, which can change the balance of power in the Indian Ocean. Maritime boundaries. Most maritime boundaries in the Indian Ocean have been demarcated, except unfortunately 2, which is the India-Pakistan boundary. That's because the start point is unknown, because there were some pillars kept put there by the British which have been washed away. The Bangladesh-India maritime boundary has not been demarcated because Bangladesh has a concave coast and is geographically disadvantaged. Some alternative way will have to be found to give equity to Bangladesh. But all the same, everyone has a rough idea where the maritime boundary exists, except the fish. The fish cross the maritime boundaries, and they are followed by the fishermen. And the fishermen are caught by the other country, and then the first country catches an equal number of fishermen. Now, this is a very unfortunate situation where in South Asia we catch fishermen instead of fish. But I think there are some mechanisms being started to try and release the fishermen as soon as they are caught. In conclusion, all I can say is that I know man is a land animal, and by and large, he's made a fairly good mess of things on land. At sea, things are not ideal, but they are certainly better than the situation is, as has been described by many speakers before. The situation is a little better at sea. It's not ideal, but not bad. Thank you.